Thanks, Mark, for that very kind introduction, and thanks to you for joining us on our webinar. For most people, estate and succession planning is a very personal project, and for some, it can be very confronting. So, if you have made the big decision to seek help from someone outside your family to help you navigate this process, it only makes sense that you want to be working with someone who is trustworthy and who is easy to talk to. But probably just as important is that you be working with people who are really interested in this area and who have the runs on the board, who do this work day in, day out, week in, week out. And that's what Mark means when he says that it's important that you work with a specialist. A specialist not only owns the right toolkit for the job, but has the knowledge and experience to know which tool should be used in which situation. When it comes to a legal advisor who specialises in estate and succession planning, though a lot of the tools in their toolkit will look very similar, a bit like the sockets in this socket set, the truth is that a solution which is a great fit for one family will be unhelpful and perhaps even damaging for another family. A specialist who does this type of legal work every day knows the difference. But first, it is really important that your advisors understand what is your desired outcome. What is it that you are trying to achieve? And that's where the work that Mark does is invaluable. He helps people to clarify their thoughts and put down in some level of detail what the legacy they wish to create will look like. But from there, we need to start creating a legal framework which will ensure that your wishes will be actioned and fulfilled with the least amount of stress and without any unnecessary tax being paid along the way. And that is where one of our tools comes in very handy, the estate and succession planning due diligence. This is a review of your affairs in terms of existing legal documents and financial statements to determine who owns what and how. Depending on your circumstances, the due diligence review might involve us looking at legal documents like trust deeds, partnership agreements, leases, and company constitutions. It can also be very important to check land ownership records, as well as the structure of bank loans and related party loans. Probably the easiest way to explain why this can be very important is to give you a very simple example. If the intention is to give the farm to Tom and the rest of the estate to Lucy, a will which is written in that way could be completely defective if in fact the farm is not owned by an individual but is in fact owned by a company, particularly if the shares in that company are owned by the will maker. Because what we've done in giving the rest of the estate to Lucy is we've given her the shares in the company which owns the land. And that would be an unintended consequence which could have been avoided by a proper due diligence process. So that's just one example of how due diligence can be an important step in this process. There are plenty of others which I'm happy to share with you either offline or during the Q&A session at the end of this presentation. For now, let's move on to other unintended consequences that can arise from a homemade will or from an estate plan that has been written by a lawyer who does wills on the side but is not a succession specialist. And that's where the distribution matrix comes in. This is a process of documenting on one piece of paper the end game in terms of the distribution of your wealth amongst your family members in the way you intend. And just as importantly, it shows the net value of each person's legacy or inheritance. I used the word net here very deliberately because the current market value of certain assets, or the current market value of primary production assets compared with off-farm assets, does not give a true picture of the end result of your plan. In the distribution matrix, we look at what debt sits with which assets, and just as importantly, how debt might need to be restructured across several assets so that one beneficiary is not necessarily left with all of the debt. As well as debt, the distribution matrix looks at what tax might be attached to certain assets. Obviously, an asset that is exempt from capital gains tax because it's the family home or because it was acquired before 1985 will have no tax attached to it if and when it is sold. Whereas other assets that will attract capital gains tax if sold, that tax has an impact on the net value of an inheritance. Understanding the net result of your plan and your preferred distribution of assets allows you to reality test that plan. In your heart of hearts, is this really what you want to see be the end result? And do you see that as being a fair outcome overall? Or is there some adjustment needed, either now or over time? The distribution matrix can also be very helpful in ultimately explaining the plan to your family members, and for everyone to see that you do understand the consequences of the plan and it does truly reflect your wishes. The other piece of information that I really want to share with you today is about the potential benefits of incorporating testamentary trusts into your wills. A lot of people don't appreciate that under a standard or simple will, an inheritance will be lost if the beneficiary is made bankrupt. And nowadays, it is not just people who can't manage credit card debt who end up bankrupt. Reputable people can easily be sued by an unhappy supplier, contractor, employee, or customer and end up bankrupt through no fault of their own. Similarly, under a standard will, an inheritance will be lost or split up if that beneficiary separates from his or her spouse. For some people, these sorts of outcomes do not concern them at all. For others, that scenario worries them a lot and can in fact lead them to thinking that they should write their will to skip a generation and leave it all to the grandchildren. We are all different and have been shaped by our own life experience. But if you are concerned in any way about these sorts of issues or want to ensure that an inheritance can be managed tax effectively, then you need to seriously consider incorporating testamentary trusts into your wills. I have included a poll which you can complete to give you some insight into where you sit on the spectrum when it comes to these issues. I hope you've found this information to be helpful. If you would like more detail about anything that we've talked about today, or if you would like a second opinion on your current will, please get in touch with me. For all our webinar attendees, I'm happy to provide a free second opinion on your current will. No obligation, and hopefully you'll get peace of mind that everything is as it should be. In worst case scenario, you'll become aware of some of the unknown unknowns and perhaps avoid some unintended consequences. Back to you, Mark.